A soft, warm wave touched Natasha's feet and brought her back to reality. The memories receded as if melted in the rays of the setting autumn sun. A firm, masculine hand rested on her shoulder. "Well, is it time to go home?" And Natalia nodded happily, smiling. Before she stood at the water's edge for a long time, and Edik, understanding, stepped aside. He sat down on the bank and watched the seagulls. He saw that she needed to be alone. He understood her from half a word, from half a look. It seemed he had known her all his life, although they had met only 6 months ago. That night was the last straw. It is not for nothing that they say that sooner or later everyone has their last straw. For her, it was the breaking of her favorite bowl. There were splinters on the floor, and no one had bothered to clean them up, not even to hide them, Natalia thought. Her mother was just a cleaner and a servant, but also a cook. Dirty dishes could barely fit in the sink, cups of morning coffee stood orphaned on the windowsill next to a full ashtray. The rooms were a mess, and in the morning when she left for work, the house was in perfect order. But she had to be at the office by 8 o'clock and her husband by 10 o'clock. The grown daughter did not go to the second shift at all. Half a day was enough to undo all her efforts. She collected things sent to the spiral, washed dishes and cooked dinner, almost simultaneously, although the only desire was to lie down and rest. All day long she had been running around, publishing balances, summarizing, coordinating, but no one at home cared. Her sad thoughts were interrupted by the sound of the key in the lock. Vlad returned from the service. Natalia heard him sniffling and undressing in the hall, muttering something to himself. Finally he looked into the kitchen. He didn't ask how he was, didn't say hello, just mumbled. "But what is it, is dinner ready?" And went to the bedroom, turning on the TV. Finally came back into the kitchen and sat down at the table. "I said, what's with the food? The soccer game is coming up. You will wait, because I had to clean up your mess first, because I cannot cook under dirty plates with leftovers and cigarette butts." Natasha couldn't stand it and burst out. After a few minutes, she put the pilaf on her husband's plate and went into the room. As usual, he undressed and scattered everything around the room. And it should be understood that if she does not clean up, then socks and shirts will still be lying around. It is not a man's job to clean up, and it is not a man's job to cook, to go shopping, to help with any little thing. According to Vlad, man was football, beer, computer games, but also food, of course, always fresh. Their daughter wasn't in a hurry to help either. She was 25 recently, but still lived with them. She wasn't in a hurry to get married, although no one called her. Natasha had an idea. She would leave everything and go away, but where to? There were no business trips, no summer house either, and Natasha raised her head to the ceiling. "Lord, give me a hint, a sign, what to do." Daria came back late, rattling the pots, not caring that her mother had to get up early. Natalia entered the kitchen. Instead of greeting her daughter, she complained that the pilaf was cold and needed to be heated. The mother couldn't prepare anything hot before she came. "By the way, Dasha and I work all day, and then I come home and clean up after you and Daddy's mess. Tell me, how can you leave such a mess in half a day? I'm not talking about the fact that you could cook by yourself and help me and learn at the same time." The daughter just mumbled something unhappy and stared at her phone. Natalia sighed and went to bed. Another day passed like 2 drops of water, similar to all the previous ones, a kind of Groundhog Day, not life. But she seemed to be hurt up there. For the next day, miracles began to happen at work. From the very morning her boss called her and, averting his eyes, began to talk about the crisis, cuts in the salary fund, staff reduction. Here in no way he with all his good to her relationship cannot pay a woman such a salary. Natasha just smiled to herself. She has known the boss for many years. He doesn't want to fire her, because it would mean paying her back wages, and he's a regular stiff. Well, Pyotr Alexeyevich, I understand everything. She smiled. You want me to write a statement that I'm not going to pay on my own? Right? But then I'll make you a deal. Let's do it this way, I'll write a statement, but so that I don't have to go to work tomorrow, instead of all the payments, you pay me half and full salary for the month. It's still a saving for you, but it's compensation for me. Of course he agreed. An hour later, Natasha was leaving the office, breathing in the air of freedom. And then it hit her. She asked for a hint, a sign. Here you go, sign and sign, God, I got it, thank you. Natalie laughed quietly and ran home. She took a quick look around, nothing new. Yesterday was just a repeat of yesterday. Okay, now you guys, it's not my problem, it's your problem. I thought to myself. And quickly threw a few things into my travel bag. The essentials and my ID. She slipped out of the apartment as fast as she could, and as long as no one saw her, she got on the bus to the train station. On the way, she studied the map. A small town by the sea caught her eye. It was the beginning of spring, she had wanted to go to the sea for so long, and this city, somewhere recently, flashed before her eyes, whether in social networks, or at work someone mentioned it, all the same means so necessary. She bought a ticket, turned off the phone, soon her husband would come home from work, and Natalia giggled, imagining his confused face. Then she thought, turned on her cell phone, typed a message and turned it off. Wrote that she wanted a break from them. She was fine, scared, and not worth looking for. Early in the morning they met in an unknown city. Natalia walked slowly down the deserted street leading from the train station to the city center. Everything was still closed, but there was no hurry. Later she would have to find a cheap hotel, rent a room for a few days and look around. She would stay here for a while. She would sort out her feelings, rest, and then think about going home. Suddenly there was an open coffee shop on the way. It smelled of freshly baked pastries and she couldn't pass it by. While she was eating, she found a nice hotel not far away and was even happy. They made great coffee and she could have breakfast here every day. The single room was very ordinary, but after the trip she thought it was wonderful. Natalia changed her clothes, lay down on the couch and turned on her cell phone. There were many missed calls, mostly from her husband and daughter. All the messages were the same. Where did you go? When will you be back? There's no food in the house. What do you think you're doing? I replied briefly to both of them at once. Dear family, I've decided to go on vacation and take a break from you. You're adults, you can do without me. Maybe you'll learn something. Time passed, but communication with the family did not improve. The grown-up husband and daughter still had only one question. When are you going to come? And clean up, feed me, and apologize? Natalia understood that she did not want to go back, and judging by her family's behavior, she had to stay in this nice city for a while. But there was one problem. The money she got when she was released was gone very quickly. Even though the hotel was considered inexpensive, the payment for the room still hit the budget hard. It was expensive to eat in a cafe, she would have to find some kind of part-time job for the time she lived here, and probably rent an apartment. Apparently, the family problem wasn't going away anytime soon. Signs were coming from everywhere, even the job issue was resolved unexpectedly quickly. In the very cafe where she was used to having breakfast and drinking delicious coffee, there was an announcement that an assistant cook was needed. Natalia went to the administrator, who sent her to the director. The man turned out to be about her age, quiet, thorough, unnamed, as they say. Eduard Anatolievich told her what was required of her and how much she would be paid. And when do I have to go to work? Asked Natalia. Well, right now, the director smiled. That's how her new working life began. She liked working in the cafe. No one treated her with a high attitude, they just treated her with respect. She quickly got into the course, she did and coped with the work playfully. It was so easy, she always cooked at home, and there was also a salary for it. She hardly ever saw the director himself. He had several of these cafes. And when he did, he was happy with everything. The staff simply adored him, a rare and very precious moment. After a while, Natalia decided to call her daughter. Dasha told her that she had found a young man and had gone to see him. Perhaps they would marry soon, but she still spoke to her mother with resentment, accusing her of abandoning them to their fate. Justifications and attempts to explain led nowhere. The daughter reported that the father was also very angry and threatened to file for divorce. Natalia smiled, somehow this fact did not bother her very much. She had long ago realized that she and her husband were really strangers, living next door to each other by fate. It was convenient for Vlad to be served and pleased. And when she stopped doing that, it was time for a divorce. Well, it looks like she's got nowhere to go back to. The apartment is Vlad's anyway, so now we have to think about a permanent arrangement. We have to wait for a paycheck and find a place to rent. That should be enough money. She lives in a modest place, not too fancy. But there's another question. She seems to have a mysterious admirer at the cafe. Often she'd find some nice trinkets in her back room. A bouquet of wild flowers, chocolate, a cake in the shape of a heart, a stuffed animal, the kind of gifts every woman would like. But it was worrying who it could be. Everything went over. The team was mostly female, even the cook was a woman, men were only the director, security guards, and an electrician who rarely came, and it was difficult for outsiders to get into the office. The gifts were always near their cubicles, and the secret would remain a mystery. Until one day Natalia came to work a little early. As she opened the door to the back room, she saw Eduard Anatolievich coming out. And on the table there were fragrant little roses. The director smiled a little embarrassed and put his finger to his lips. Please forgive these expressions of sympathy, Natalia Petrovna. It is not customary for us to talk about such subjects at work, so I will invite you for a walk in the evening after work, and I will try to justify my behavior. She was still considering whether to go or not, but her heart was already telling her that she would go against the arguments of reason. After all, she has nothing to lose, meat to talk, if something goes wrong, she just quits. Although it would be a pity, Natasha managed to fall in love with a small town by the sea. Eduard proved to be quite gallant. The awkward silence was soon broken. The meeting turned out to be long, and there were so many different and similar people along the sea who had a lot to talk about. It turned out that Eduard's wife had died several years ago. His adult children have long since left for different countries and continents. They love him very much, but they have their own lives. Then Eduard said that when he saw her, he realized that she was the one he wanted to live with, and only then was he convinced that he was right. Then he apologized for his childishness. He should have told her how he felt right away. But he was afraid that Natalia would refuse. Then there were a few more months of seeing each other without anyone in the cafe knowing, and then the proposal. Which Natalia accepted, of course. Vlad's divorce went surprisingly smoothly. Maybe because she did not claim the apartment, or maybe because he was already looking for a blonde around the corner from the courthouse. Natalia and Edik are happy. Almost 5 years, they wake up and fall asleep together, generally do everything together. At first it was strange, but Natasha soon got used to it. It turned out to be so great, cutting salads together, roasting meat, brewing strong coffee, walking along the sea holding hands.